What do you do if you know that communication inside your organization is a bit crap, but you don't know how to fix it and you don't know the cause of the problem? Do you A, invest in a new piece of employee communication software because obviously technology is going to solve all your problem? Do you B, blame the comms team and slash all their resources because they're clearly doing a terrible job? Or do you C, invest some time in finding out what's going wrong and coming up with data-driven recommendations for change? Obviously, I'm going to recommend C, and that's what we're going to talk about in this video: how to review your system of internal communication, how to identify what's working, what's not, and make recommendations to improve it and make communication more effective in your organization. Now, some people call this process of reviewing your internal communication, they call it an internal communications audit. I actually don't love to use the word audit because often when I'm working with clients, it can make members of their leadership team a little bit skittish, particularly like the chief finance officer. They hear the word audit and it seems like this big, complicated, formal process. It really isn't. It's just a review, a deep dive review of how your internal communication system is working. So in this video, I'm going to call it an internal communication review. Now, the review doesn't have to be super complicated or difficult. What it will be is very time consuming and it will take a lot of energy and effort. It needs to be really well thought out, really carefully planned in order to have any sort of meaningful results. And in essence, an internal communication review is a process of getting really deeply curious about the current state of internal communication in your organization. So what is it like right now? It's a process of research and evaluation, so you can figure out what's working really well, what's not working really well, what needs to change. What do your employees need? What do your key stakeholders expect? And what kind of practical, actionable recommendations can we build to improve how we communicate at work? So before we jump into how do you actually do it, let's look at when would you do it? Why would you want to do a process like this if it takes so much time and energy? Sometimes you might want to do an internal comms review when there is a trigger point. Maybe your organization is introducing a new strategy. Maybe you have a new chief communications officer coming in. Maybe you've had a big communication crisis at work and it's triggered a sort of a deep dive into what went wrong. Another time you might consider doing it is maybe you've joined a new organization as their senior internal communications leader and you want to take some time at the start to really identify what's working, what might need to change. Or maybe you just work in an organization where you have that nagging feeling of this just isn't working very well, but I'm not sure why. That's the reason a lot of clients come to me for help with this. They say, I don't know what the problem is, but our system isn't good and we need some help to figure out what's going on. You can really do an internal communications audit anytime that you want. I really recommend once you do it, try to repeat it about every 2 years so that you can compare the progress you're making over time, see if you're actually implementing any of those recommendations that you found, see what's changing over time. It stops your system getting stagnant or breaking down because you're constantly iterating and improving as you go. Something else I want to touch on before we jump into how do you actually do this is the question of, do you really need an external consultant to do an internal communications review? Can I not just do it myself? The answer is, annoyingly, it depends. If you feel you have the skills, capacity and the time to do it yourself, then probably you can. The first thing I'd be looking at is genuinely, do you have the capacity to take this on top of your day job? An internal communications review can take about 8 to 12 weeks. So can you genuinely carve out the time from your day job, give this your full attention, and give it the time and energy that it needs? The next thing I'd be asking myself is, am I actually qualified to do this research? So are you any good at doing quantitative and qualitative data collection and analysis? Do you have any training or expertise in that area? Because both of them are really fundamental to doing a really good internal communications review. And the third thing I'd be asking is, can I really take all of that data analysis, follow the logic and build a set of actionable, practical recommendations based on all the data and evidence in front of me? Now, if you feel like you're saying yes to all of that and you genuinely don't have any budget to get someone in to help you, then absolutely give it a go yourself. I think the main difficulty you're going to face when you're doing this yourself is that you won't have the objectivity or the fresh eyes of somebody who is outside your organization, unless you're brand new, of course. If you are reviewing a system of communication that you have been running yourself for some time, it's very hard to be objective about that, to review your own work And the advantage really of having an outsider to come in is they will spot things that you just won't. When you're inside an organization for a while, you just get used to how things are done there and it becomes normal. But an outsider stepping in will start to spot things that look slightly off or look slightly strange that maybe you don't even notice anymore. I see this all the time with clients. I will spot things that seem interesting or unusual to me that have pretty much gone unnoticed by the in-house team simply because they see it every day and they think that it's normal. Now, the main reason you might want to hire somebody to do this is because you don't have the time to do it yourself. That's the main reason that I hear. This is essentially taking on a second job for a couple of months. And another really important thing to consider is sometimes when you do an internal communications review, you uncover things that maybe your leaders won't like. So maybe you uncover that there is really low trust among leaders in the organization, or that people are really unhappy with X, Y, or Z. So are you really going to be comfortable and able to stand in front of your leadership team, present your findings and the recommendations without fear of any retaliation or retribution? This totally comes down to the culture of your organization, whether you have psychological safety or not. But the beauty of having an outsider coming in is they're not part of your hierarchy, they're not part of your organizational culture. They are in a much better position to speak truth to power. And sometimes, I see this a lot and it's a bit weird, but sometimes leaders are much more likely to listen to and heed the recommendations of an external consultant rather than their in-house advisor, potentially just because they've paid money for this consultant's report and therefore they're going to action it. But that's another advantage to bringing someone in to help you with this. And finally, before we jump into the steps, there is always a hybrid approach. Sometimes I work with in-house communicators who want to be more involved. They don't want someone to just come in and do it. So there is a hybrid approach where I would act as an advisor and a guide. I would help them to do a lot of it themselves, but they also have me to act as that objective outsider to help them spot things and to guide them in how to do the research, how to run the focus groups and so on. All right, I don't want you to be intimidated by the idea of doing a review. If it is something you want to do yourself, let's look through 6 key steps that you would follow when you are reviewing your system of internal communication. Step 1, define the purpose of the review. Why are you doing it? Get really, really clear on that and document it. Is there something specific that you would want to investigate? Do you feel like there is something fundamentally broken that you want to focus on? Maybe it's your channels, maybe it's your leadership communication, maybe it's your messaging. Broadly, there are 2 different types of approaches you can take when you're defining your purpose at the start. You can take a deductive approach, which is where you develop a hypothesis at the start and then you're going to be very focused on testing and researching that hypothesis all the way through. Or there's an inductive approach, which is much more exploratory approach. You don't have a particular hypothesis that you're going to test. You are going in and looking with a much more open mind, a broader approach, finding patterns and analysing what's going on. Both of these are perfectly valid. The inductive approach takes a bit more time, and you do need good research skills for both of these. Step 2 is your desk research. So this is where I always start to have loads of fun, because this is where you can start to get really nosy and really curious about what's going on in your organization. So what you want to do is start gathering loads of data that already exists. Maybe you have employee engagement surveys or pulse surveys. Maybe you have some metrics from some of your communication channels. Maybe you have feedback from some of your employees about communication. Maybe your HR team has exit interviews. Be really interesting to look at them and see if communication is coming up as an issue for people who are leaving the company. Any documents you have, like the business strategy, the internal communication strategy, the internal communication annual plan, editorial calendars, any previous reviews or evaluations of communication that have been done to date. It'd also be great to start getting examples of the types of tactics that are used in the organization, the channels that are used, the messages that are used. Gather as much as you can of stuff that already exists to try and start building a picture of what is internal communication like in this organization right now. Step 3 builds on that. Step 3 is all about original research, and this is where your research skills are going to come into play. So in step 2, you are doing your desk research, and this is gonna start posing lots of questions in your mind. For example, if you are reviewing the communication channels and you see there is a PDF newsletter that goes out via email and there are no metrics on that at all, something I'd be asking is anybody reading this? Is this useful to people? Do they like it? We have no metrics. How are we going to find that out? What you'll find in step 2 is that it doesn't paint enough of a picture to help you make recommendations or changes. You need to build on that with more research. You may want to do some quantitative research, which is typically an employee survey. Totally depends on what already exists in your organization. Some clients I work with have annual employee engagement surveys and quarterly pulse surveys, and that captures quite a lot. So they won't need another survey on top of that. But if your organization doesn't have any survey data, it would be worth gathering some quantitative data for your review, and use your desk research to guide your questions on what is it that you actually want to find out and what is particularly interesting to you. The quantitative data, the survey, is going to tell you the what, but it's not really going to tell you the why. And to understand why things are happening a certain way or why employees feel a certain way, you need to do qualitative data. And this is usually comprised of focus groups and one-to-one interviews. This is a great opportunity to essentially have really curious conversations with employees and leaders to start unpacking maybe some of the findings from your survey. So if your survey tells you that 72% of employees are dissatisfied with leadership communications, or they think the town hall is a waste of time, that survey isn't going to tell you why they feel that way, but you can ask these questions in a focus group. I'm a total focus group nerd, by the way. I originally trained as a sociologist and social researcher. So if you are interested in a specific video about how to run a focus group, including how to do it remotely, leave a comment below. Quite happy to help you with that. Oh, let's pause briefly here. If you are not a subscriber yet, do me a favor. Will you hit that button down there that says subscribe? 81% of you watching these videos are not yet subscribed to my channel. I am really decided, for some reason, I'm going to hit 10,000 subscribers, so I need your support to do that. Okay, so you have done your original research, you've done your quantitative data collection, you've done your qualitative data collection. Now you move into step 4, which is data analysis. This is the really fun part because I'm a total comms nerd. I love this bit. This is where you really start indulging your curiosity. You're going to look through all the documents that you gathered in step 1. You're going to look through all the information you gathered in step 3, and you're going to start looking for themes. What is the data telling you? What patterns can you see? What suddenly seems glaringly obvious? What problems can you see, and what strengths can you see? There might be something that's already working really well and that's come through really clearly in the research. Step 5 is about building on that and making recommendations. This requires sometimes some diplomacy or some awareness of the culture of the organization, because some recommendations will be more palatable than others. There is no point recommending that the company invests a significant amount of money in a brand new intranet or a digital platform if the company is on a hiring freeze, they don't have the money, and that's just not realistic or helpful. In saying that, I would never hold back too much, so make the recommendations based on what is going to fix the problems that you have identified, what is going to make the biggest impact, and what is essential, what is really badly needed. And often when I'm building these recommendations, I would put them in 3 groups. I would put them in short term, medium term, and long term. It breaks it up into chunks and makes it a little bit easier to build a roadmap of what you're going to do and when. And then step 6, the last one, the deeply unglamorous work of writing a report. This is probably the most boring bit. I kind of like it because I like to write, but it's really, really important. Please don't skip this bit. If you take the time to document your process, your findings, and your recommendations really well, future you will thank you for this, because in 2 years' time, when you want to repeat this process, you have it all there and you've made it easy for you to do it again and compare the results. So write down everything that you did, how you did it, how many focus groups you did, how many people were in the focus groups, how many interviews you did. Write down all your recommendations for change. And I would recommend writing 2 versions of this report. One is the really super detailed, quite quite long version that's for you and your team so that you have all the detail. The other version is the higher level summary version for your leadership team or your key stakeholders that really gives them the shortened, this is what we did, this is what we found, this is what we're recommending, but much, much shorter, less detail. After your review is finished, make sure that you communicate your findings to your leadership team and build a detailed action plan for what's going to happen next. And your action plan should include any resources that are needed to deliver this. So maybe you need some extra budget, maybe you need some extra headcount, maybe you do need a tool or some sort, some technology. Make sure you document all of that. So there you are. And you can see now that it takes some time, particularly the research bit takes time, but it's not necessarily super complicated. If you have good analytical skills and you are just deeply, deeply curious and you can ask a lot of questions, I think you will probably find this process very enjoyable. I definitely do. I hope this was useful. I wonder, as you're listening to this, are you thinking, oh, I really need to do this in my organization? There is a feeling like we're not really doing everything right, or we could be doing a little bit better. This process is just really helpful for doing that deep dive, figuring out what needs to change and making an action plan. If you do a review right, you're really going to set yourself up for a success in the long run. Okay, hope this was super helpful. As ever, leave any comments below for other topics you want me to cover. So see you next time.